next time. Come late.
Come late. I can't help it, you know.
Right.
Are we live on YouTube?
Yes, problem is now I'm going to hear myself twice.
No.
No.
Oh,
Oh, fine, thank you.
not on.
It is. We are on. Mooting now streaming live on YouTube, it says.
Oh, we are.
But okay, today we're doing a very, very, very interesting daf. If I would have more time, we don't. Yes, pictures, lots of pictures. So I've got pictures. Okay. So the Mishnah is discussing one basic question, and that is measuring the 2,000 amas. So now there are two main topics today. It's very much interesting daf. One is, what do you use to measure?
The rope, isn't it?
Oh.
50 minus 2 tefachim, no?
No.
Go for the
Oh,
hand.
oh, that was one shine Rashi, 50 amas. 50 amas, right. But only on flat. In mountains, we use 4 amas ropes. We'll see in a minute why. Okay. So that's one topic, is the kind of measuring thing that we use. That's A. The second thing is, what do you do if you've got a very big ditch or a mountain? Now, we're going to describe, there are 3 ways to go through a ditch. Oh, you got the picture books. Oh, we'll do straight. Yeah, we're to the Mishnah. We're going to do a little bit of introduction because that makes it easier. Yeah, it's one person on. I don't know. Yehuda, is Yehuda Stern?
Yeah.
Good evening, Yehuda.
Yeah, hi.
Hi, how are you? Right.
Good, Baruch Hashem.
Oh. So, let's just get, if you got a picture, Shin Lamed here, nice dramatic picture. Oh, I'll show it to you. Can you see it? Oh, no, you can't see it. Oh, you put it, have you got the ability to Shin Lamed Hey, Shin Lamed Vav, Shin Lamed Zayin. And if you don't mind, also Shin Mem Hey, it's a couple of pages later, but Shin Mem Hey. Have you done Shin Mem Hey as well? Okay. Second time. Okay, let's imagine without the pictures. Shin Mem Hey. Have you got it? There are 3 ways to do a ditch. We'll talk about a ditch because ditch is slightly easier than a mountain. One way is like this. You take a rope on one side of the ditch, take a rope on the other side of the ditch, and hold the rope. That way is quite a kula. In what way is it a kula? Because if you were to go down along the bottom and then back up, it would be maybe 200-300 amas. By just doing it a rope across, you're only doing 50 amas. That is one way. An even more kula way, which is even a bigger kula, is that you forget about the walls of the ditch and you only measure the actual ditch itself, the actual canyon itself, and you forget about the walls of the canyon. So let's say you do 100 amas till the canyon, then 100 amas at the bottom of the canyon, you go up the canyon, another, and carry on from there. You don't count the walls at all. As if it's a bridge. As the crow flies. Even better than the crow flies, because when the crow flies, no, there's a little bit. No, it's not true. Forget the crow. No. When you do as the crow flies, the first one was as the crow flies. You hold the rope on one side, the rope on the other side. I'm pleased you asked it. The second one is even less than the crow flies, because when the crow flies, the actual ditch itself is going down, and then goes.
With the thing,
But no, not bad. The walls aren't 100% straight, so therefore the walls themselves. Let's say the ditch itself 50 amas wide, but the walls of the ditch is, let's say, only 5 amas wide because it is a very steep slope.
Yeah.
So there's 5 amas of the slope, 50 amas of the bottom, 5 amas of the slope at the top. Now you're only measuring the bottom. You're not measuring the bottom. That's even less than. It's a tiny bit less, but it is less than the crow flies. It's 50 less than 60. You with me? Right, so I wonder if they made a picture of it. I wonder if they made a picture of it. So I'm sure they must have made a picture somewhere of it. Yeah, there's one picture. Let's say Shin Samach Beis. You got it, Shin Samach Beis. You do Shin Samach Beis.
Can you read?
Right.
Shin Samach Beis.
Right.
If you look there, so now you're measuring 900. It's a tosis. The principle is clear. Can you see 900? As the crow flies, it's actually 900 plus 107 plus another 1,000. but we're not measuring as
How
the
much
curve
does the gradient
flies.
have to be until we
Oh.
stop doing that?
Very good. Yeah, you hit the nail on the head. It's the gradient that we're discussing. Right, now wait a second. Now, wait a second. Now, the other one is Shin Mem Hey. Shin Mem Hey, have you got the picture of Shin Mem Hey? Shin Mem Hey is the picture which we once discussed it before. We discussed Shin Mem Hey before. What was that? That one person holds it by his chest, by his heart, and one person holds it by his feet. Do you remember discussing it? We did definitely discuss it. Right.
There's a colour
That one is a colour, but it's the most chomer of all three. Again, let's get three. The first one was you're just crossing it over, you're holding a rope, you go across. The second one is you don't even measure the walls, you just measure the ditch. And this one, at the end of the day, you are measuring a little bit the whole climbing up and down. Only what you're gaining is that every single time you're gaining a little bit, half the height of a human person. So it is a complicated way of measuring. These are three ways of measuring. And as Moshe pointed out, when we do use A, B, or C, depends on how bad the gradient is. I'll tell you the logic. Tchum, it's about walking. If the gradient is so steep that nobody can walk there, so what would you measure? Only the bottom.
It goes after the gradient.
So if it's not such a bad gradient,
the more homo you do.
very good.
The less colour they give.
Brilliant. Okay, so now we can really skip the DAF. Actually, no, it's a lot of details. That's a very lot of details. But that says the Mishnah. The Mishnah was out basically you have to use the rope 50 hours long, not more, not less. Can anybody give a guess why not more, not less? Okay, I thought it's like if it's a very, very long rope, what happens? The rope sags in the middle. If it's a very long rope, what will happen is you'll end up a chumrah. Because you'll count 100 amas, but really it wasn't 100 amas, it was only 90, just sagged 10 amas in the middle. Very good. Less, there's a different problem. Ashes. When you do less, you'll pull it. And then you'll do more than 50. Less, it's only 10 amas. So you can stretch it because it's a rope. The rope can be stretched. Okay.
So why can't you stretch a 50?
Yeah.
Pull really hard.
Because 50 amas is a very long rope, not easy to stretch a 50 amma rope. A 10 amma rope, if I gave you a rope of 10 amas, then we could probably stretch it to 12, probably. 50 amas, it's very, very heavy and long before you start. Okay, we'll see more in the Gemara. Okay.
Maybe
Maybe
the longer it is, the thicker it is, the harder it is to pull.
You always have to measure it against your heart. Everybody has to hold against the heart. There's a huge machlokas, comes all the way down to the Bia Aloch and the Shtavur. The Mishnah says you have to measure against your heart. So you hold the rope, you hold it against your heart. Why against your heart? So now, Rashi says, very balabatish, if I'm allowed to say so, is that if everybody would hold it at a different place, you will not get a fair measure. One person holding it by his heart, one person by his feet, one person by his head. And then what would happen is you won't get a fair fit out. So Chazal had to choose a place. Since they chose a place, they decided to do it by the heart. That's what Rashi says. There's a Tosfos Rosh that adds that when you want to hold something firm, the easiest place to hold it is by your chest, by your heart. The Ritva says a whole different matter. The Ritva says that really we would prefer that you should put it down on the floor. And then that way you get the real correct measurement. But the problem is that you'd have to bend down and pick up the rope every 50 amas. So Chazal said like this: if you can't be bothered bending down, do it by your heart. But if you're ready to bend down and put it on the floor, that's even better. So the Bialocha brings a machlokas, what's best? According to Rashi, what's best is by your heart. According to the Torah, what's best is on the floor. Bialocha says it's easier. What? Oh, he says that's what the Mishnah is trying to say. That if you're not going to bother doing it correctly, so do it against your heart. Okay. Now we'll get to that was the first one. You reached a what's the word for it? A ditch, what? A valley. Ditch or valley or legeda or fence. You swallow it up. Swallowing it up is one way which you hold a rope on one side, the other person holds the other side. It's 50 amas. You ignore the going up, the going down, or the up and down. Now all the Shonim Asakashi, if you've got a wall, how are you going to be mavlioi? When I hold it and you hold it, the wall. So what they say is you take a stick. It's actually a picture. Shinam Dvov. I don't know if you've already uploaded it. You have a stick, 50 amas long, and then you hold it 50 amas. Can you see it's a very easy picture to look at. Shinam Dvov. Right. So that's how you do it if you've got a ditch or thing. Oh. In these two words, we have a huge amount of Rishonim. I'm going to tell you Rashi's second pshat. Rashi's second pshat, which is the easiest to understand, is picture Shin Lamed Zayin. Go to picture Shin Lamed Zayin. It's the next page. It's a very nice picture. They did a very dramatic picture. What happened was there was a ditch which was more than 50 amas wide. So you can't have one person standing on one side, one person standing on the other side. Why can't I have one person standing on one side? Because it wouldn't fit if you put them into the hole. So what do? You go to the narrow part. Very good. So what you do is like this. You put a stick in the ground where you're going to go. Oh, Mishnah asks the question. Another go. Wait a second. Wait a second. But let's get to correct one bit by bit. That's right. If you, the Shomri say, if you get to a narrow, you walk along to your right or to your left. Get to a narrow part.
You want to sort it? Sure, I can't get in downstairs.
It's a call out church.
Yeah, I couldn't get in.
I couldn't get in.
Now we have to wait.
Who's sure?
No.
Sure.
It was
wasn't
nothing was working. Yeah,
What?
yeah, I took it off so that you
I
could get
obviously-
in. Yeah, I left it off so everyone could get in. But once you put it on, no.
So what happened was there's a narrow part and a wide part. So what does he do? If there would be a narrow part opposite the town, you just hold it on a rope on each side. But the problem is there is no narrow part. There's a wide part. So what do you have to do? You have to turn to your right or to your left and then measure across the narrow part and then come back. Yes, that's right. Very good. Very good. Oh, Mamish, we should all discuss. I said to you this, so you can't imagine how much this. But that's just nice pshat though. It's a fits. And then you go back to the place where it is corresponding to where you turned off. Right?
It doesn't add up to that.
No, not the bit that you went to the right or the left, but the 50 amas
Not
does.
the left, right.
That's right. Very good. And the right or left does not add to your left. Very good. The Mishnah carries on. Okay, well, we should wait one more minute. So just give it to. That means.
Do you know what it was downstairs? That you had both got.
No, we tried
Yeah,
everything.
What's the problem with it?
Yeah, might have had both
The
on
guy
that.
who put the maglock on.
We tried
The
both of
guy
them.
who put my back on is useless. It's not wasn't me anyway, but yeah, useless.
The company.
The company's useless.
I think
You
you
don't
don't
have to
know how to walk along the ledge 2,000 hours either.
Oh, you should have that is a brilliant thing. Did you hear what he just said? Chaim, did you hear what Chaim said? What happens if the width of the wide part is more than 2,000 amas? What are you going to do?
Well, then you're really stuck. Then what are you going to do? Right?
Oh.
You don't have to come. I said that you come 2,000 hours like doing circles.
No, but you're stuck anyway. You can't go.
You're asking Mamish the
But
Gemara's
what
questions.
can you do though?
You're asking the Gemara's
But what
questions.
can you do anyway?
Oh, we'll see
You
what
can't
Gemara
get to the
says.
other side anyway. so
It's
what's
very
the
good.
point?
Very good. Very
But can you
Mamish.
get to the
Eh,
side?
no, this is a double Chaim. This is a double Chaim. No, this is Chaim. This is Chaim. We are going to have it through. No, this is Mamish. Okay. Go. Higia lahar. Right. Higia lahar. You get to a mountain. You get to a mountain and you have exactly the same problems. What do? It's the same idea. You get to a mountain, so you take a rope. You go look like this. You've got a mountain,
Yeah.
so you walk. You take a. If it's a very small mountain, less than 50 amas across. So what do? Is you just take one rope one side, one rope the other side, and you ignore the slope, right? How do you get the rope across? You have a very big stick going up. The other person holds a big stick going up. And then you do it across. Wait, one of them belongs to Gershi. I took it off his place. That's the one? So put it back in his place then, Daniel, if you don't mind, when you're finished. He said he doesn't mind. Put it by underneath the stand if you don't mind. Again, if it's a very small mountain, then what you do is you do a stick up, stick across, stick down, and the thing. If it's a very wide one, you have to go to your right or your left and then go across. Says the Mishnah, top of the Chesed Medalef, what Chaim wanted to say, tell us, you can't go out of the tchum. So, if you've got a picture here, for some reason the picture is a lot longer away. It is right. We've done a lot of complicated pictures here, but okay. As long as by going to your right or to your left, you will not go out of the tchum. Again, you've got a ditch in front of the city.
I mean, if you walk 2,000 meters,
If you walk each direction out to get across the ditch,
And you
you
walk
can't.
diagonally, wouldn't you?
No. Again, you come out of the city. You're trying to measure your 2,000 amas.
Yeah.
After 100 amas, you came to a ditch.
Yeah, but
You can't get 50 amas across because it's more than 50 amas wide. So you say, I'll go to the right where it narrows or to the left where it narrows. But it doesn't narrow for 2,000 amas. So it says the Mishnah, what should you do? If you can't, either because it's more than 50 amas wide or you can't go to the right or the left, Mekadrin means to make a hole through the mountain. And as we explained, that is the picture which we said before, is when one person is sitting on, holds it by his chest, the next person by his feet, the next person by his chest, the next person by his feet. And then that way, it is true that you're measuring. What? Oh, very good. Now listen, this is what we should say. This was very careful. If the gradient is very, very shallow, you will not lose anything at all because each person, if it's very gradual, if it is very steep, you will still be losing because what will happen is the amount that you're gaining every 4 amas. In such a case, you do Mekadrin Bahorim, you use ropes of 4 amas, not 50 amas. In such a case, Mekadrin Bahorim, then if it's very steep, you're going to lose out. And then we'll see all of it. It says, well, we're not in the middle. How do we know that we use a rope of 50 amas? And all the Shelim point out, of course, we're not talking about devices, we're talking about derabbanans, but we always look from a the Torah says the Mishkan was 50 by 50, which is not true. The Mishkan was how much? 50 by 100. It says the Mishkan was 100 by 50 by 50. If you would have a surveyor telling you such a thing, you'd fire him. The Mishkan was 100 by 50 by 50. Doesn't make any sense. So we actually dashed it once, which was going to ask. You take a rope of 50. We needed that pasuk to tell us that a kalfof is 50 and another 50 around it. If you remember, we had this very complicated Rashi. But what happens, Rashi wants to tell us how to measure a kalfof. So what you do is you go 50 by 50, and then you take another 50 and you put it all the way around, which came to 70 by 70. Because the Mishkan is really 100 by 50. If you want to transfer 100 by 50 to a square, so most of us will just take out a calculator and not bother with anything else, right? You go 100 times 50 is 5,000 square meters, square it, it gets to 70 something. But Rashi doesn't do that. How does Rashi do it? Because it doesn't have a calculator. What you do is you do this. You take 50 by 50, and then you take the other 50 by 50, you cut it into strips, and then you make a strip of 10 amas on each side, and then another strip of less of 1 amma, and that's how you make it into your 70 by 70. Says the Gemara, so it's a fascinating thing that you've got a pasuk regarding the Mishkan, and by the way, the Torah says chamishim bechamishim, and from there we learn 2 complete drashas. One is that the size of a kalfof is 70 by 70, and the other thing is, which was the size of the Mishkan, and the other thing we learn is that a rope should be 50 by 50. Oh. Says the Gemara, you should take a rope which is bigger or smaller. A rope which is shorter, you'll be malba. How will you be malba? As we said, you'll stretch it. If it's less, if it's more, then it sags. And once it sags, you'll end up you'll have less, and you'll end up with a chumma. We don't want you to do machlis, so you have to do exactly 50. You have to use a rope which is made out of the material called afiskim. And the word itself says, "Ma fiskima." What is that? Obab abo nargilo. It's nargilo. Furthermore, my nargilo. What is nargilo? I was interested to see that the article does not even translate these words because obviously they don't know either. Obab Yaakov dikla dechad navo. It's the bark, a single bark around a tree, which is a particular kind of plant, and that is like it's like a material which we use for measure. They're arguing whether it's that kind of rope or different. It's a kind of plant-based thing, which is used as a rope. And the mice we don't even paskin like this. And I don't have a clear English translation for any of these, as we will see. Okay. Tanya, the best thing to measure is iron chains. Why the best thing to measure? They don't move, and you can't stretch, and they don't. They
can't sag.
Not if you put it properly, but they don't. What's the word? They don't shrink. They don't shrink, and they don't stretch. What can we do? That when he was trying to measure, so what happened was he used a rope. So from here we learn that when the Torah asks you to measure, you should always use a rope. That he used a stick. a measuring rod, not a rope. And so Hulatari, for the gates, you use a rod, but for other things you measure with a rope. But I'm very happy to see that this Rosh says a very nice thing. Why would you make for a gate a rod and everything else a rope?
If you stand
Smaller.
there, if you
The
stand there,
gate's
look,
smaller
you're not
than
gonna
the-
beat towards the wall.
Yeah, it's not bad, but
You're
that this
losing
Rosh
out
doesn't
on-
say
it
that.
depends who you're in.
That's what it said. He says because of the gates, you always want to measure height as well. And you can't measure height with a rope. That's the thing. What? How are you going to hang from the top? How are you going to get there?
Either not put it up yet.
Ah, yeah.
Not put the gate up. It's to measure it.
No, when it's already standing. Okay. Tell me, Rabbi Yosef. Shloisha chavolim here. There are three kinds of rope, and again, we do not have a clear translation for them. Shel megag. Megag is a reed, Rashi says. Shel netza is made out of avovas. The shel pishton and of nylon, linen. Shel megag the por aduma, they would tie it up to put it on the fire. Now, why would you use a reed? Tana. They would put it with a reed rope and put it on the fire. The reason is, by Por Aduma, we were extremely, extremely careful that what? More than that, they should not become tummy. Por Aduma, we're very careful. The Gemara tells us in Yoma that the woman would go away before the baby was born to live in a house that will never become tummy because it was a stone built in the archway. Now, this particular rope can't become kalatuma because it's just made out of plain reed. It's not being worked with. So therefore, it can't become tummy, so we use it for that. The next one is, yes, you use for schach. Shonut that's a wicker where that's from robbers. The sota. The kohen would take the sota, would rip her clothes and reveal her body, but then he didn't want the shirts to fall off. So what he would do is that maybe chevan mitzvi. The kosher Day would tie it above her breasts. Why? In order it shouldn't fall off. And again, you've got the Yerushalmi says in Santi Yerushalmi that even though what's the idea is because Mitzvi reminds of Mitzrayim, and Mitzrayim they behaved with znus. So if we want to remind her that the way she behaved was no good, so we use a rope which reminds her of that thing. Okay. And finally, shall pishton limited. But if you want to measure, you have to use pishton, and that's how we pass them. So what happens is, if you ever want to measure, you have to use pishton, which is like a linen kind of material. That is the correct rope, whatever you try and measure. I spoke to my father, he told me that when they learned Eiruvin in Manchester Yeshiva, they got a map of Manchester. Like I said last night, we were discussing it, and they measured, and they came up with all kinds of different places. That means you're right. You could probably walk for hundreds of miles in certain ways, but within certain areas, you can get stuck. For example, they found that Heaton Park is more than 2,000 amas.
No, it's always been that.
Heaton Park?
It's huge.
That park is more than 2,000 amas. I said it's not a problem. Why is it not a problem?
It's within the thing. It's within
That doesn't
the
help
town.
you.
It's within the town.
Is the houses in
Yeah,
it?
of course it is. There's loads of houses.
Oh, because you can walk around. If it's more than 4,000 amas, it's a problem.
But it's definitely more than
Because
4,000 numbers.
It's not more than 4,000 amas.
Heaton Park's huge.
4,000 amas at any point, it's more.
It's a square. How big is 4,000 numbers? No, how much is a number?
An amma is a half a meter. So 4,000 is a 2,000 meters. Anywhere where there's 2,000 meters away from the road, from a house. Is there anywhere in Heaton Park which is more than 2,000 meters away from a house? Nobody lives. Did anybody live there?
No, it's like an event.
And they found that so I don't get. So he said to me that there was somebody who needed to get to the place. He was child was in hospital in a different town, and he was trying to measure the tchum. What?
What is that? There's
If
no
it's
Eiruvin
more-
there anyway. So there is no
No, but it doesn't matter. I don't believe there's more than 2 kilometers from any house.
1.4 miles. The whole park is only 1.4 miles.
Right, so there won't be 2 kilometers away from any house. I don't believe. Anyway, but he said that what happened was somebody had a shy. There was a different time. What happened was he walked. He saw there was a petrol station. So can you include that because it was within 141?
Someone's in there all day, all night. No, usually.
See, he knocked on. They asked him. They told him that there's somebody sleeps there. They actually even have a bed there.
Oh, wow.
Do they?
Yes. So
Not
you can
all.
use. No, this
24
particular
hour
petrol.
ones,
Okay. What? Tatton Park would be a problem. That means it is possible to walk from this place probably for hundreds of miles. but not in any direction, not at every place, not in a straight line.
I've seen the ones when they're on the fair.
Yeah, but if you were living in
Right.
no.
Yeah, you could have
you
both.
would have a massive problem. That's what the double spectrum.
Yeah.
You-
Okay.
No, it's not.
Says the Gemara right.
I'm trying to control both anyway, so
Why can't you walk on the ditch? We climb down, climb back up, and go across. So
no, that's what we're doing there.
no, we're trying to work out how far is person allowed to walk to. Tchum.
Theoretically, could go.
That's it. Says the Gemara right. Hoye moedet begab. We tell you chutz mit das. Bichlad im in yochel avir. Hulech bokesh yochel avir. Ma'al fliyoi. As we explained at great length, if you can't swallow it up, why can't you swallow it up? Because it's more than 50 amos wide. So what do you do if you can't swallow it up? You walk to the right or the left, and then with sofa kedeged midasa, you look to see where you reached. You go back to the other time. If not, you swallow it up with sofa. You go back. Now, oh, can you load up this picture? It's a nice picture. I liked it. Sorry, there's a lot of pictures over here. I don't know why they put it here. It's picture Shin Mem Zayin. Rashi's got two mahalchim, and this is the one which he likes better. Shin Mem Zayin. Look at picture Shin Mem Zayin. Somebody actually, I think, even shouted it out. What happened was like this. The ditch is more than 50 amos. Have you got the picture? It's more than 50 amos. So what did you say? Go to the right or the left. You know, the problem is that the ditch itself circles the city to the right or to the left. No, not only is it big, but it actually goes round. It curls around.
So what's the point then? You can't go past it anyway.
Why not? You can climb down on Shabbos and go through. My problem is not, again, I should be a bit better. People can walk through it. The problem is when we were trying to measure 2,000 amos, we don't want to include ditches because we want to be maker. We want to try and give you the further the better. So you should be able to walk far. So since this normally we would say is hold a rope on one side, hope a rope on the other side, and count as 50 amos.
Just stop there and continue.
You can't because you don't know how wide the ditch is.
I think.
What's one goes around? Sorry.
So how are you going to? Before we said that if it's more than 50 amos wide, what should you do? Right here, you can't go right to the
Go
right.
down and measure what you can.
Because no, you can't because you're going to at one stage hold the rope across. Where are you going to hold the rope across? Normally, you look at picture. Look at picture Shin Lamed Zayin. The picture. Look at Shin Lamed Zayin. Picture before.
Yeah.
So there, what happens is you hold the rope on your right, and then you go back and you see the footsteps. He goes back to where he is. He knows the measurements. Can you see he's counting off the measurements each time 50 amos, and then he knows how far. So then he knows from the city. Can you see the city on the bottom left? So then he knows how far he's allowed to walk. But in this particular case, how is he going to do it? What should he do? What should he do in Shin Mem Zayin?
Well, that's 50 amos. Can't he do it there and walk around?
Yeah, but then
Count how far he's gone back.
I mean,
The-
50 amos then, just keep on going all the way around.
but then he's going to lose tons.
Why? I'll go back to where he.
No, because that we don't know. Because
sides.
since he's counted it off, he can't. We don't. That we don't allow. Oh, that's what we're going to discuss in a minute. We don't do that. That at Kedekach we don't do. I know in this picture is showing you that you can, but we don't do that because you can't compare it to this side where he's trying to count 2,000 amos out of the city where he's always keeping in one line. Here,
Can't go around the bend.
can't go around the bend. So what can we do? So what do we do? Then he has to do this more complicated system, which we said is one person holds it to his feet, one person holds it to his chest, and that's how you climb it up and climb it down. If you get to a wall, we're even more maker. We only evaluate the height of the wall, meaning the width of the wall. So you have to actually count it by putting a rope across. A wall that you can't walk on top of it, then you have to count all of it. If you look at pictures Shin Mem Ches, these are pictures Shin Mem Ches, right? So there you count all of it. Why? Because at the end of the day, people can walk it. But if there would be a wall which you can't walk over it, let's say, look at picture Shin Nun base. So then you do. I know in the picture it does show you that you measure it, but Maisa you don't. You don't measure the wall. That's just Tosfos, but that's not how we do it. You don't measure the wall. Why don't you measure the wall? Because or Shin Samach base, you don't measure the wall because the wall is not possible to walk on it. Okay, then we'll get to really. If you've got a good word for it in English, things that you use to measure that walls are straight. What's it called? Spirit level. Now, what they used to do is, if you look at picture, sorry, I've got loads of pictures here. Picture Shin Nun Aleph and then Shin Nun Dalet. Look at picture Shin Nun Aleph and Shin Nun Dalet. Yeah, a lot of pictures today. So there, I actually was very disturbed with these pictures because I didn't think he had done such a good job. I'm not an artist myself. But if you look at Shin Nun Aleph, Shin Nun Dalet, he's trying to show you one of them where the spirit level is straight and one where the spirit level is not straight. That means it's not managed like a spirit level, it's a string. Plumb line. Oh, that's a better word. A heavy weight with a line. So now, when you've got a very, very steep cliff, cliff, then the plumb line goes down straight. If it's not a steep cliff, what will happen is it hits the wall. Oh, Shin Nun Aleph is a picture where it's hitting the wall. I can't say it's hitting the wall. If you look very carefully, maybe you could tell. Shin Nun Dalet, it's not hitting the wall. You can see it a little bit. Shin Nun Aleph, it's hitting the wall. And Shin Nun Dalet, look at Shin Nun Dalet. I could have done it better. I think. A better picture. Oh, my God, connected. Love to know the chesed based off of the page. I'm running out of time. Then what happens is you don't measure the whole wall, you only measure the bottom. The kama unke guy. How deep? This is a different shayla. What happens if you've got a ditch that goes down and then up, and it's less than 50 amos across? What do? You ignore it. You ignore the ditch. You just measure across. To what depth? To what depth? Up to what depth? So Omar Yosef Alpine, up to 2,000 amos. Can you imagine? That means if the person were to walk it, he would be out of the tchum by the time he gets to the bottom of the ditch. It would be very, very steep. Yes, the Grand Canyon. How deep is it? Maybe more than 2,000 amos. Okay, more than a kilometer deep. More than a kilometer, 2,000 amos. Okay, Sabaya said to me, how can you say 2,000 amos? It's not true. You're only allowed to the height of 100, no more. He holds like Achim that say even if it's 2,000. He says even more than 2,000. You've got three shitters. 100 amos, 2,000, or Rabbi Yosef even more than 2,000. I don't understand Rabbi Yosef. Rabbi Yosef is arguing on two Tanoi. Command, he's not holding like the Tanakam who said 100, not like Achim who said 2,000, saying even more. And it's more Hossam, they were talking about where it's not so steep, where the plumb line doesn't go straight down, it goes out. Since it goes out, so therefore the wall is accessible, so therefore you can limit it to how far you can go down. What? Don't catch that.
You can only go across.
No. Because they've got houses where you can always access it. If you've got right. So the answer is he holds that because the wall is so steep, it's not considered moving. That's not considered walking. Since it's not considered walking, so therefore we don't 2,000 amos. Chazal said we don't want you to walk more than 2,000 amos. Such a steep climb is not considered walking at all. So you can climb and climb and climb, and you haven't actually moved at all. Even though you've moved a few hundred yamas, but at mice, at the end of the day, that's not considered walking, so it's not considered moving at all. So up to 4 amos. That means up to 4 amos. That means we take the plumb line, we take a stick which sticks out 4 amos, and we see if the plumb line after 4 amos of distance hits the side of the wall, that's not so steep. If after 4 amos going out, the plumb line doesn't hit the wall, that means the plumb line is so steep that every 4 amos the plumb line does not touch the wall. That is not considered normal walking, and you don't have to measure it at all. So, this Tosfos, the third Tosfos, goes a long avichus. What do we paskin? And it's very complicated Tosfos. I just say it very briefly because we haven't got time unfortunately to go through all the halachas. Actually, that's not the rest is much easier. Okay, let's just say like this. The gist of it is like this. If it's less than 50 amos, you just hold the rope on both sides and you're okay. I mean, it's okay. So if you have a need to measure, if it is more than 50 amos, So if you go to the right or left, you go to the right or left, and then you're okay. If you can't go to the right or left, either because it's always more than 50 amos, or because it's more than the tchum, etc., or because it circles around, then it depends how steep it is. If it's very steep, that it goes down to the extent that the plumb line would hit, meaning it will not hit the wall, meaning that it's not comfortable to walk down, you only measure the ditch itself. That means if you've got the Grand Canyon, then if it's assuming it's very steep, you only measure the valley of it, and then you miss out the sides. If it's not so steep, then you have to measure what's called mekadron. Mekadron is one person holds it to his chest, the person holds it to his feet, next person, etc., which means that you gain a bit because you're always losing a half a person's height, but you lose a bit because then think, what? No, so sometimes you'll gain, sometimes you'll lose. But the point is like this, that you do all the way down and then up and then again across all the way up, and then you have to count all of it into your measure of the Eiruvin. So you could end up with not being able to walk so far. That's okay. A mountain, this is not talking about a ditch, it's about a mountain, where the gradient is 10 in 5 amos. That's a normal road, and you have to climb and measure the whole thing. 10 tefachim in 5 amos. That means that's a gradient, let's work it out. A gradient of 10 tefachim in 5 amos. 5 amos is 30 tefachim. So 1 in 30% gradient is considered a normal road, and then you have to measure the entire distance. 30% gradient. Yes, 30% gradient is considered a normal road. If you think about it, you go on a pathway in Heaton Park. There's a place where you go up, like it's got trees on both sides. That probably is 30% gradient, no? No, it's not.
25% green, like that.
And how
There's
is
a road
that?
20 in Ramazottom, 25% green. You can't cycle there. I mean, the average person can't.
Can you walk? But you
Walking
walk.
up there is struggling.
Yeah?
You still walk.
Let's cycle up.
So they phoned me up today, asked me a question. Hey, I didn't like the question. I didn't know the answer. Maybe that's why I didn't like the question. He says to me, what happens if on Shabbos it rains, and then the slope was very steep and it rained, heavy rain, and that made the slope slightly less gradient. So now you're going to have to be more machmir, because now the gradient is less.
Or more makeup because it's made it slippery.
It wasn't too about slippery, it was just about gradient.
I'm reading here, 30 degrees, not the same amount of percentage.
30%.
Degrees is very
Correct.
steep.
30 degrees is 58%.
Oh. No, here we're talking about 30%. We're not talking about 30.
So
Maybe it's
Where's
30
that
degrees.
30% from? You got 10 tefachim,
10 tefachim.
4 amos and 10 tefachim.
No, 10 tefachim and 5 amos is considered a normal road. Okay, 10 tefachim, every 5 amos, every 30 amos, you're going up 10 tefachim. So every 5 amos distance, you're going up 10 tefachim. So that's 30, that's one, that is 30, that's 30, 30%.
17 degrees.
It's 17 degrees.
That's what
I don't know what you're talking about, though, because
I'm
you're...
Russian, but is it true then? It's 12%.
Okay. Some say again,
80% up.
That's what I said, 17 degrees. So it's not that.
and there's some people will make up. That's a cool about it. About the second, the summer to Chomish. About the second, the summer to he says other way around, and this is actually how we pass them. That when it is 10 tefachim in 5 amos, that is a steep gradient, and then you can skip it out. But if it's less than that, meaning it's even a higher gradient, then you avoid the whole climb altogether. You only measure the top, not the climbing at all, because it's impossible to. It's not considered normal walking. So that's more cool. It's an interesting swap. Let's say you come into a ditch and it's more than 50 hours. What did we say? What should you do? Turn right or left and get to a place where the ditch is less 50 hours. But you mustn't walk out of the tchum. Why not? Let me talk about measuring on Friday. You're not measuring on Shabbos. You're measuring on Friday. So why not walk out the tchum till where the ditch is less than 50 hours, cross it, come back into the tchum? The answer is people seeing you measuring it will say to themselves, oh, this person is measuring the tchum, so you're allowed to walk out the tchum. He thinks it's all part of the tchum, not realizing that you're actually going to recalculate it and then come back in and start walking from there. In many case in the Mekadron, how do you do Mekadron? Tachton connected midboy. The bottom one holds it against his heart. Anyone connected like of opposite his feet. You have to use a rope of 4 amas, not 50. So for every 4 amas, you save yourself half the height of a person. Usually the chest is about halfway. It says one more. This het that we go and we save you is only by Uvei Tchumen, not by Egla Rufa, not by Miklot. Egla Rufa is when we want to measure which is the closest city to the dead person. And Oy Miklot is that if a person is allowed to go 2,000 amas outside his Oy Miklot, he's allowed to be, you're allowed to kill him. No, because it's the Raisas, this din of Mekadin is only said by the Rabbanons and not by the Raisas. That's right. We don't want to give a kula for the Raisas. That's right. Because it's a din Torah. This is a kula Rabbanon, it's a din Rabbanon. I like to at least the Mishnah because we've got quite a lot more. Yeah, let's do the Mishnah. Ein moedet in element amumcha. Oh. Ein moedet in element amumcha. You only measure from a mumcha. You have to find somebody who knows how to do it properly. That means what happened was like this. A person put signposts, here's the tchum, here's the tchum, here's the tchum. One of the signposts is very far, and one of the signposts is much nearer. So what do? What would you do if you see one signpost is far, one signpost is near? Oh, why? Yeah, but we're talking about which is D'Rabbanan, Safed D'Rabbanan, Nekula. So you're allowed to be Meiko. So it's saying, so you've got a person set up a tchum to one place, a tchum to somewhere else. The Gemara asks what that means. We just said it. Why is it repeating itself? Okay, we'll see when we get to the Gemara. That means what happens is that even an Eved and a Shivcha are allowed to tell us where is Tchum Shabbos, because since it's a din to Rabbanan, you're allowed to make it. So let's say you've got a non-Jewish maidservant, well, not a Jewish one, Jewish one obviously, but non-Jewish maidservant, and she says, this is where Tchum Shabbos is, then you're allowed to. Now, what about the cotton? Mishnah is about cotton. So the Rishonim Paskin like this: a cotton, when he sees something when he's a cotton, and he tells us about it when he's a godder, that's okay. But a cotton, while he's a cotton, is no good. I mean, like this. Let's say, for example, you lived in a different town when you were a child. Let's say you lived in the Lake District when you were a child, and you come there for Shabbos. Now you're an adult. You're allowed to say, "I remember when I was a child, we used to walk to that tree on Shabbos, but we knew that was the end of the tchum." But when you're still a child, then we don't rely on the words of a cotton. Okay, we'll stop here because it's like after a daf. We'll have to put it in Taka. So this is Wednesday. Tomorrow is Wednesday. Thursday. On Friday, which is Mamish Shoshana Rabbah, we'll finish the prayer. It's quite nice. See you on Shoshana Rabbah. Nice to see you, Levi. Oh, he's gone off already. Yehuda, how are you? Yehuda, you okay?
Sure,
Oh, he's gone off.
6:50, and we'll finish by when?
I'm pressing end.